bunch of stuff to do. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Kennedy.
This is Porter's son, Jack McNeil. He's going to help me out. So I think what I'll do is I'll get him to resplice the speech so that at the end it'll look like you gave me a standing ovation. He can do all of that stuff. That was incredible. So I went around and I met everybody, which was a terrible idea because it turned out that half the people in the room were like English professors. And I said, oh my God. And then a couple of them started giving me advice about what to say and how to say and how to stand. I was like, oh. And then I made them all swear to wait to the end to critique it and not interrupt me. And I'll try to get it. I'll try to get off to the right start here, and hopefully they'll let me get through it. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what I've done and how I ended up out here. So I'm one of Bobby and Ethel Kennedy's 11 kids. And when I was in high school, my oldest brother, Joe Kennedy, he became a congressman, and now his son is a congressman. Joe started a not-for-profit oil company. Yeah. Yeah. It's not-for-profit oil company. The way it worked is he would buy oil, send it to a refinery, then sell off gasoline, Vaseline, jet fuel, and 30 other byproducts. Take the profit on that, pay for the home heating oil that was left over, and then distribute that to poor people throughout Massachusetts. And then it spread to 28 different states. And I thought, man, I want to do what he's done. He's figured out the way to bend the rules of the economy, make it work for everybody, help others like my mother told us we had to, and not have to be on the phone all day asking people for money to help the other people. So I wanted to do what Joe had done. I thought that was going to be like a movement, and it was. It became what's known as a social business. And I wanted to do that as clear as day, but as clear as day, I also knew I did not want to work for my oldest brother. It was the 1980s at the time, and President Reagan had done something no other president had ever done. He had started homelessness. He had created hunger. It had been part of America for 200 years, but he did things. He changed laws. He threw people out of homes. He cut off funding. And he started hunger. And it was unbelievable being, in high school and college and seeing that happen in Washington, D.C. and watching the laws move through the Congress, seeing the government make those executive decisions and the impact on the streets weeks and months later. And I decided to go into the anti-hunger movement. I wanted to help feed people. Of course, I didn't know how to feed people. I didn't know anything about it, so I talked to folks when I was in college, and they said, go work for a grain processor. Telling me grain processors like telling you a not-for-profit oil company. I had no idea what they were talking about. They convinced me to do that. I got a job with Archer Daniels Midland, 1986. I moved from Boston to Decatur. No, it's true. Decatur has 2 main streets. That didn't make it easy. Anyways, they were great. And then they moved me to little towns all over Illinois. I'd go to a small grain operator, one of theirs, and I'd call up farmers and buy corn and soybeans. I go to this little elevator. I usually don't tell this story, but I'll tell it here. I'd go into this elevator, and they'd give me a list of farmers. I'd call them up, and I'd say, today corn's selling at $1.86 1/8 on the Chicago Exchange, and we're paying a 2-cent premium. If you have any corn that you'd like to sell us at $1.88 1/8, we'd like to buy that from you. And they'd say, well, where's Frank? I said, well, Frank's sitting right next to me. We only talked to Frank, so Frank would call me. Frank would say, well, yeah, I don't know, he just showed up. It's really weird, because he's wearing a navy blue suit and he looks like one of the Kennedys. Farmers first come in and meet me. Anyways, I had a great time. Then they moved me up to Peoria, where they make alcohol out of corn. And then that's unbelievable, because then they load it on barges, send it down the Illinois River to the Mississippi, then out New Orleans, across the Gulf, through the Panama Canal, across the Pacific to Japan, where they flavor it. They load it on barges again, send it to the port of Los Angeles, and sell it to the people out there as sake. Yes. How about that? Any company can do that. It's going to do really well. So then I ended up all over the place, and I traded barge freight in St. Louis, and then Salina, Kansas, Lincoln, Nebraska, and flour business. And then I ended up at the Board of Trade and the Mercantile Exchange. And there was this one other guy in the training program with me, which it never occurred to me was an odd deal. There were only two of us, and we had hopscotched around. And he was not terribly attractive. He was older and fat and short and bald, and they called him Fester. Like, he walked into the Board of Trade, and they changed his name. Nobody ever knew his name again. They just call him Fester and abused him the whole time, and he was sort of clever. It was unbelievable for those people, because it wasn't very nice of them to do that. It was a terrible idea to do it to him, because in reality he was an undercover FBI agent. And he indicted like everybody who called him Fester. They went to jail. Good outcome. Yeah. So then, I was like 23. Everybody I was working with went to jail, like literally went to jail. And I thought, oh, God, everybody in Chicago's wearing a wire. Watch out. Anyways, I left ADM, started working at the Merchandise Mart. I got involved with the Greater Chicago Food Depository, which is the nation's largest food bank. And we grew it tremendously, and I meet with these soup kitchens and pantries, and there are a number of people who volunteer in a pantry close by, and they understand some of the challenges I'm going to describe. But those soup kitchens and pantries, they were never designed to help people for a long period of time. It was really to help people during a rough spot, in between jobs, to help them and their families. Now those soup kitchens and pantries that were started in the 1980s, they've been feeding the same people, not for days and weeks, but for months and years and now decades. And they're under tremendous pressure. And a lot of them aren't going to make it. And about 5 years ago, Sheila and I started Top Box Foods, which is an anti-hunger program. It's a not-for-profit. It's a lot like Citizens in that it's self-funding. We don't give anything away. People buy the food from us. Now they get super discounts, 50% off of a grocery store, and it's much higher quality, meats and vegetables and fruits and all sorts of things. And it's more like a hand up than a hand out. And they're our clients and our customers, and we talk to them all the time. We are in about 120 different community organizations, churches, and things like that. We're all over northern Illinois and Cook County and Lake County, all over Chicago. And it's interesting because when I was at the food bank, I'd go to soup kitchens and pantries, and I'd talk to people, and they'd recognize me maybe, and they'd come up and say, "Are you Mr. Kennedy?" But they wouldn't talk to me like that. They wouldn't look me in the eyes. They didn't see me as a peer. They would look down at their shoes, and they'd approach me with their chin on their chest, and they'd have that discussion. They'd say, "Thank you for feeding my family." It was a very bad time in American history, what we did in those decades. At Top Box, it's different. These are our customers and our clients. We want to talk to them. And I see these people, and they come up to me, and they'll say, "Are you Mr. Kennedy?" I say, "Yes, I am." They say, "Well, I'm one of your clients." I say, I know that." And then they're looking me right in the eyes. They say, "Look, I bought a box from you last month, vegetable box, and the broccoli wasn't very good. You need to do a better job with the broccoli." I say, "Well, my wife picked out the broccoli." Talk to her. But it's funny, we talk to them, and they tell us their family stories, and almost always there's like a whole generation missing from the family tree. And I don't probe, but that's what's going on. These are the people that this economy has left behind. The great things in downtown Chicago is unbelievable right now. We've got a huge development going on down there. And gleaming towers and cranes, it's exciting. The federal government just spent $150 million building a river walk along the river. Michigan Avenue is incredible. These people will never see any of that. That's not part of their lives. Live 3-4 miles from the lake, Lake Michigan, all those beaches, they've never been to any of them. But But they're also aware that there's 100-year-old social service agencies in those areas, taking care of them, looking out for them, people like us or the Y or Metropolitan Family Services. So they're not raging pissed about what's happened. But you come down to other parts of Illinois, leave the Chicago area, and things are different. Thing is, a lot of Illinois looks like the South Side from, I don't know, Roosevelt Road to 95th Street. Not really in skin color, but in the things that matter, in unemployment, poverty rates, unemployment for kids. It's almost exactly the same. But in many of those counties, there aren't 100-year-old social service agencies. There's whole counties without a grocery store now. A lot of people have to drive 30 miles to a health care clinic, 50 or 100 to a real hospital. You want to go to a great children's hospital? You have to go to Children's in Chicago. And their jobs are disappearing. Their kids aren't going to get jobs. And they're like, wait, what happened? What's happened? This isn't how it was supposed to be. This is not the promise of our country. We were told this is the land of opportunity, the place of the American dream where anybody can make it. Our kids aren't going to make it. And they think somehow that this group of elites, of union members and political elites, business people, got together in a room like this and created an economy that was meant to destroy their lives. Create a political relationship that allows them never to participate, and a social arrangement where they're excluded. And then last November, they go to the polls. They walk in there and they think, you people have created an economy that's not going to work for us. We're going to send you a president that's not going to work for you. And that's what they do. They're not racist. They don't think that the Muslims are out to kill us all. They don't think it's the Mexicans. I mean, Trump talks like that. But that's not what they're doing. They're pissed that their kids aren't going to make it. That in this, the land of opportunity, the American dream is not being kept. And unless we keep it, things are going to get worse. They'll send somebody worse than Trump. You think that's impossible, but Trump, I swear, Trump can't read a memo. He won't do that. It's not like Obama used to take those books home at night. He'd spend hours reading this stuff. Trump will never do that. He won't sit for a CIA briefing. Most interesting stuff in the world, the greatest secrets ever, and he won't sit there. He should, because now they're talking about him. He'll never figure out how to use the levers of government to do the awful things that he would like to do, but the next fella might. And they might do it a little more quietly and secretively. Maybe not take those Stars of David off the white supremacist websites. Maybe be more subtle about that. Maybe not hint that they're going to go after all the Muslims. Because if he hadn't done that, the courts wouldn't have been able to stop him. Maybe just deport people and not tell everybody. Deport everybody who's living here and send them back to Mexico, including the 40,000 that came from Ireland. Won't they be shocked when they find themselves in Mexico? But we need to stop that. We need to stop that. We need to restore the American dream, or he will, or someone will, destroy this country. And that idea of, it's really about just social, economic mobility. How do we make it possible for people to make it here? It's not that complicated. Everything that needs to be done here has been done in some other state. We need to make sure that every kid has access to early childhood education. Otherwise, by the time they're I talked too fast for applause there. But otherwise, those kids, by the time they're in first grade, they're like 3 months behind. By the time they're in sixth grade, they're a year behind. By the time they're in high school, they're so far behind they think they'll never catch up, and they drop out instead. And we need to, this is the most important thing, we need to pay for our grade schools and our high schools at the state level and not through local property taxes. It's destroying our state. It's destroying the future of these kids. It's making it impossible for them to compete with kids born in other states, and that's immoral. We need to get away from that. And then we need to restore access to higher ed, community colleges and universities. And then that sort of goes into the next point, which is then we have to pay for all of that. And how do we pay for that? And we've got the two things that are going on in the state that are really terrible is that we have declining taxable assets, and according to Governor Rauner, the need for rising taxes. I didn't study economics, but I can tell you that scenario, declining taxable assets and the need for rising taxes, that's circling the drain. I'm sure they've got a technical term for it, but you're circling the drain. That's the end of the world economically. So we need more taxable assets, or it's the end. So how do we do that? Where do they do that really well? They do that really well in the places that anybody with college-age kids wants to move to. Those kids, they all want to live in like 5 places. Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, Research Triangle, this little area in Pittsburgh around Carnegie Mellon and Pitt, Boston and New York. That's where they all want to live. Because in each of those communities, they're home to a big Tier 1 research institution and then a whole ecosystem of other systems of higher ed. And what happens, I saw it in Boston when I was in high school and college, the 2 greatest employers in Boston were Wang Computers and Digital Equipment Corporation. My kids have never ever heard of those companies. They're gone now. But there's like 500 companies who I've never heard of who've replaced them, doing things that I couldn't possibly understand. And what happened there is John Kerry and Ted Kennedy and Tip O'Neill would go to Washington. They'd bring home federal government research grants to places like Harvard and MIT and UMass and Mass General. And the professors there, they would study basic research, but it would slough off applied research, and people would invest in that applied research, those business ideas. They'd start little companies who would employ people who paid taxes, that funded local schools and educated a whole new generation ready to keep that going again and again. It's like perpetual job creation. MIT, which is a small school, their alumni have started 30,000 companies. They employ 4.5 million people. We don't need to try to get a Boeing to move here. I mean, trying to get a Fortune 100 company to relocate to Illinois, that's really hard. But rebuilding our universities and turning them into job creation machines, that's really easy. Because we have great public universities in every dense population center in the state. No other state has that. Publics everywhere. And we can unify our interests, bring everybody together and pursue that strategy like no other state can do. The truth is, the University of Illinois, where I spent 5 years as chairman, I think we have more kids that scored above a 26 or 27 on the ACT than the entire Ivy League combined. Boston's now the biggest college town, Chicago's the biggest college town in America. And we have great colleges all over the state. All we have to do is take advantage of that and we can rebuild our economy. But that's not what's happening. Governor Rauner is making all of this worse. I go around, people are like, what are you going to do about the gridlock in Springfield, the standoff, the fact that they can't get along and compromise? And the first thing I say is, that's not what's going on in Springfield. This isn't a standoff between people who can't get along. This is Governor Rauner and a hostage taking the budget hostage and saying, look, I'm not going to let you pass a budget until you pass my turnaround agenda. Okay, so he's got a 5-item turnaround agenda, and then you get close to like dealing with that, and then he adds another thing or another thing after that. He's full of it. I mean, he is. He doesn't. I know more about bringing companies to Illinois than he'll ever learn. I'm sorry, and that's not like hubris. More companies have moved to Illinois to open an office for the first time in the Merchandise Mart Center than any other location in the state, by a mile. More companies have moved to Illinois to open an office for the first time in the Mart Center than anywhere else. I know what it takes to get them to move here and to expand once they arrive. I dealt with 5,000 companies. Not one of those companies ever asked me about tort reform or workers' comp or right to work or how we draw our maps or term limits. Not one of them ever asked me about that. Do you think Steelcase, Hayworth, Herman Miller, or Knoll, the big furniture manufacturer, said, Chris, I'd really like to come to Chicago, make a lot of money selling furniture in Chicago, but geez, the way you draw your maps for your state reps, wow, I'm really hung up on that. Didn't happen, never will. It's just not true. We need to put an end to all of that, pass a budget and give people predictability, which is all that they want. And what we really need to do is lift the cloak of fear, which has been placed across our state. Fear. That's the great emotion today. One of our most insightful political columnists writes about Governor Rauner. He said he's got a supremely vengeful reputation. That's how he's described in the press. Where state reps and state senators in his party don't speak up. They don't speak out against him because they're so fearful of retribution. Where university presidents and board members that he's appointed do not speak out. The budgets for those very colleges and universities. 800 social service agencies are slowly going out of business in this state. Right before our eyes, and the thing that they fear worse than failure is his retribution. Where parents don't know if their kids will return from other states where they've gone to college because those parents weren't confident that our own universities would be here in 4 years to graduate those kids. And now we may lose them to forever, to Kentucky. Where loved ones fear whether or not the agencies that are taking care of their elderly parents or disabled children, whether they'll be around in another year. Where moms and dads have legitimate fear about whether or not their public schools or grade schools will open for the fall semester. And fear that our generation will be the last generation to know the glory of the American dream. Fear should not lead us to surrender, never. And there are leaders in our party who may be too fearful to fight. They're prepared to make a deal. They're prepared to go to a rich man and to say, if you fight our war for us, we will make you our king. That attitude is not worthy of Democrats. It's not worthy of an American. We should never trade freedom from one man to subservience to another. We need as leaders those who are ready to revolt, not those who are ready to submit. No great progress in the United States history has ever come without sacrifice. Let's not give up on building the strength that comes from making an effort. For a more simple remedy is just never going to work. A billionaire bully is a billionaire bully. They get their way. Money talks, it does not listen. A Democratic governor who doesn't need his party is as dangerous as a Republican governor who doesn't need his. By saying to a rich man, if you agree to protect us, if we will agree to be your servants. If that's what we're prepared to do, well, we're violating American history, and we're moving to some perverse modern form of feudalism and violating 250 years of hard-fought American freedom. There's no easy way out of the situation that we're in with a billionaire bully as our governor. There just isn't. We need to stop kidding ourselves and looking for a simple solution. We're each going to have to fight for ourselves and for each other. We're going to have to fight in every house, in every block, in every precinct, in every ward, in every township, in every county in the state. And that's what we need to do. We need to go back. Thank you. History is our great teacher. All we have to do is go back and think about what the founding fathers taught us. They gave us sort of a slogan. They gave us a motto. They said, out of many, one. And President Lincoln, who we're all taught to worship as we learn in grade school, he gives his life to the cause he thought was more important than any other, which was to hold the Union together. President Roosevelt, one of the wealthiest men of his generation, says in the 1940s, we're all going to go up or we're all going to go down, but we're going to do it together. If Rauner wants a fight, let's give him one. Let's stand on the right side. Founding fathers who gave us a greater communal purpose. Let's stand with Abraham Lincoln, who gave his life to something he thought was more important. Let's stand with President Roosevelt, who knew we were all in it together. And if we do that, we'll give our kids great jobs, we'll give them long careers, we'll keep them in Illinois, and we'll restore the American dream. And that's why I want to be your governor. Thank you all.